Linux, and also reveals the different poles of the polar opposites of the personalities of these two men that I think really shaped the movement. At the time, since I just started making the documentary, I still didn't have a full sense of the relationship between Linus and Richard, and of the degree to which I think Richard really deserves a lot of credit for what has happened with the overall movement. So at the time I was thinking, well, where's the story? Is the story in what Richard is saying, or is the story in how Linus is reacting to it? And I was like most of the crowd in the convention hall there, confused as to what was going on, because basically Richard is sitting here saying, we're at Linux World, but you shouldn't call it that. So he's basically challenging the whole premise of why he's there. But at the same time, Linus is bringing up his kids on stage. Everyone's like, oh, look at the cute, blonde-headed girls, and how warm and fuzzy that is. And it's like, where's the story? What's who's the focus there? Who's upstaging who in a sense? And that's why you see the camera pivoting around. I was just trying to capture it as it happened, but I think it really sums up kind of a latent competitiveness between the two in a sense. I don't know.
Not everybody said that. And clearly, we knew we would eventually get the kernel done. But as it happens, somebody else did a better kernel before we did. Now, in the old days, we had an overall strategy for calling people's attention to the importance of freedom, to the freedom that they can have or not have when they use a computer. Well, what can we do about it? As far as I can tell,
this again is one of the reasons I liked, and this is one of the sequences that really convinced me to stick with the 2:3:5:1 to aspect ratio, because I was able, you get kind of a sense of a tableau here. You see the photographers, you see the children running around, you've got Richard on one side of the screen. The wide shot allowed you really to see the story, as opposed to if I were shooting just the square that you're used to with your TV. It'd really just be Richard on stage. You wouldn't get the sense of all the kind of the different layers of action going on simultaneously, and basically then kind of seeing, and it's everyone's interpretation as to what's actually going on there, but just seeing all that, so you could kind of grasp what you wanted to grasp from that. Now, what's fascinating, because I was using again Larry, because Larry was nice enough to give me the access, I was using Larry as kind of a first-person response, a first-person perspective on kind of this growing enthusiasm in the movement, because at the time he knew the VA Linux was preparing to go public, and so this is just literally off the cuff, kind of his enthusiasm for what lies ahead. It's basically like you think you may have the winning lottery ticket, you just got to go home and double check the numbers. At the same time, when Larry and Bob Young and Mark Ewing and everyone else that's in the film, when they started dealing with Linux in the early 90s, or Michael Tiemann in 1989 with the GNU tools, no one would have thought that it would be this. I mean, that it would grow this much. And especially, it really took off starting in 98 with the Netscape. I mean, that really was the turning point. And it's just amazing to think how it exploded. And again, that's coming back to one of the visual metaphors, which we're going to see in a second, with what's called low-speed photography, which gives you that fast motion, which is how quickly things were evolving and changing and growing, and kind of the frenetic pace of it. This is again a way to kind of break up the visuals and break up the film and have some visuals that were more than simply raw information being thrown at you. And I think this footage I just love. This is a party, and you basically get to see what it's like when hackers dance.
So leading up to the IPO, we had arrived actually in San Diego on Tuesday night. We spent Wednesday morning meeting investors in San Diego. We flew up to San Francisco.
Now, this whole next sequence, we're dealing with the VA Linux IPO and the consequences of that, has been very controversial among people who have seen the film and given me feedback. Because people, particularly software developers involved with Linux and open source software from outside the United States, have obviously much less of a vested interest or care about what happened with the U.S. stock markets in the late 90s and the turn of the millennium. And so, so the question is, well, why such the focus? But at the same time, this really captures, I think, a distinct moment in history, which is important for understanding the growing pains of Linux, and also just to understand the historical times in which all this occurred. In my opinion, even though the NASDAQ would top out in March of 2000, in my opinion, the VA Linux IPO really does represent the top of the market of the great bull market, and also the top of just the incredible enthusiasm, if you want to say, or the irrational exuberance, if you want to say, of all that occurred.
We walked in, it was a big screen TV showing CNBC, and it was amazing to us, but the theme...
But I have to tell you, no one involved in VA Linux at the time, because I remember I just was lucky enough to actually be filming around the time of the IPO, so I was up there in the offices. I got to tell you, before the IPO occurred, no one had any clue that it would perform like this, because I remember asking people, because this was, again, in the day when companies go public and their stock price would double or triple or whatever, and I asked people, what do you think it'll do? And the wildest, the most optimistic number I think I heard was maybe $70 or $80 a share, and that was basically based upon kind of what Red Hat had done. And everyone was absolutely flabbergasted at what the result was. And I was there the other day, and I was just watching it, and it was weird because at the VA Linux office, actually, no one had a TV there, ironically enough. So the news of it didn't come in via CNBC or the radio. It just basically someone finally clicked on their computer and realized the stock had started trading, and they go, "You're not going to believe this." And people started walking around the office spreading the word, and people just were stunned. I don't think we'll ever see anything like this again, and for a lot of reasons, both structurally within the way companies are brought public, also probably a well-earned skepticism about all this.
We were stunned. We were lucky that we were able to get back to the offices. We'd been in San Francisco, so we could come back to VA's offices to see everyone in the office for the IPO. We got back, we had, everyone was obviously very excited. The IPO had done just tremendous.
You would think after a IPO such as the one VA Linux had that they would have had some crazy party indicative of the internet bubble era, but in the end, I think one of the charming things is it is such a modest little party that they just kind of threw together at the, they got some eats there and some drink, but no crazy spectacular, just some party balloons. What can you say about it? It's an IPO that's kind of exceptional in an exceptional era. It's amazing. Look at those stock prices. Cisco 96. You can see eToys coming up at 47. I mean, that's what I'm saying. It's just an era that we won't see anything like this for years to come. There you see Linus in his open source shirt. Again, kind of his subtle little statement there. I wanted to end the film with these two upcoming clips, this one with Linus and the final one with Richard, to kind of really sum up what's the core of the movement. And because the end of the film obviously focuses more on the business side of it, but at the end of the day, the commercialization of Linux and open source is critical to kind of give it, it's like a thrust, a booster rocket to kind of give it its own momentum to break free of the gravity of the world of academia and of hobby projects. But what makes it unique and what gives it its quality is the fact that despite the fates of Red Hat and VA Linux, as you're going to see in these two title cards, which I refer to as title cards of doom and have been quite controversial, is the fact that the movement continues to flourish because it has these unique qualities of freely shared and open technology. So if one company fails or doesn't succeed, another company can come right in and pick it back up and keep running with the ball. And so that's what I think is great, because Richard really sums it up. It's one big hack. It's this clever thing that he thought up, and now you have companies like IBM and Hewlett-Packard basically putting their resources into making his vision and the vision of all these other people around the world that had no interest in making, a commercial adventure, but they had an interest in this freely shared technology, and that's exactly what they're getting. And I think it's fantastic, and I think it's important for people to remember that and for Richard to remember that, is that while it's not called GNU, it's not called free software, his vision of a freely shared operating system with open technology has succeeded, and it's flourishing, and it will continue to flourish regardless of what happens with IPOs or companies or business models. I found the band the GNU Stallmans when I was filming one evening in an office park in Sunnyvale, and I heard this crazy kind of dissonant sound coming out of the back of one of the office buildings. So I tracked it down, and I saw this group of computer programmers and marketing guys having a monthly jam session. They told me the name of the band was the GNU Stallmans, and that they were a tribute band to Richard Stallman. The best part is they told me that they did a rock and roll version of the Free Software song. The lyrics had been written by Richard Stallman as an anthem for the free software movement. And I thought, this is a great way to end the film. I've got a revolution, and now I've found an anthem for the revolution. A few months later, I made arrangements to film another jam session of theirs. They were just jamming in an empty room in the back of one of the office buildings. So to dress it up a bit, we found a mirrored disco ball, put a spotlight on that, spun it around, put some other lights with the red and green gels, and then hauled in some junk and had a quick and dirty music video set. I think we only did 4 takes. The audio you're hearing is live from one of those takes. I think this is the third take is the one we ended up using in the movie, and we just played it all the way through. On vocals is John Mark Walker, and then on the left-hand side of the screen, I think that's Rob Anthony and Brad Grantham playing guitar. And then on drums, you have Scott McNeil, and then you have Brian Biles on the larger drum. And then on the right-hand side of the screen, that's Pat McGovern, and in the blue shirt, I believe it's Kevin Collins. One of the reasons I love, again, one of the reasons I love the 2:3:5:1 aspect ratio is how else are you going to get 7 band members in the same frame and not have a lot of empty space above and at the bottom without having the widescreen aspect ratio. Final thing I want to talk about are just my collaborators on the film. When we were shooting interviews, I had a fantastic camera assistant from Los Angeles named Ryan J. and a great sound guy from Marin County named Stephen Balick. My principal collaborator during post-production was my composer, Christopher Anderson Bozzoli. Chris and I had known each other for years. And when I began the film, I told Chris, we were kind of talking about the feel of the film, and the kind of the counterculture 1960s kind of optimism that kind of underlies everything, and also the epic quality of it. I said, Chris, imagine if the Beatles in 1969 had been hired to do the score to the film Patton. And kind of what an odd juxtaposition that would be. And we kind of worked with that idea. And then what sealed the deal is on the recording stage we're going to use, we found a Hammond B3 organ. So it was a perfect way for us to get kind of that period feel. The final thing you'll notice in the film is the copyright notice. I chose to copyright the film and keep it closed source, both for financial reasons. I made the film independently and kind of went into debt and worked without a salary, and I kind of need to make money. And then also, just on an artistic and editorial level, I just saw the film as this particular way, and it really pained me to see someone re-edit it. I want to thank everyone who watched the film and everyone who helped me make it. Thanks again. Bye.